I have the great pleasure of sitting here with playwright Octavio Solis of the play Mother Road that you just heard read. Octavio, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Emily.
We feel so lucky to have gotten to read your beautiful, masterful piece. And I just wanted to start by asking you, how did you get into playwriting?
Well, I got into it kind of by accident. I had really wanted to be an actor. I was thrust into a high school play when I was a sophomore in high school in El Paso, Texas, and I did not want to be there. But they really wanted me for this production of The Diary of Anne Frank. And I went in there kicking and screaming. I didn't want to do it. But when we started reading the work and I started hearing these other older students of mine who were actors in it just tear into the work and completely transform this gymnasium, I knew that I was in a place of magic, and I just wanted more of that. And I just never looked back. I said, this is what I want to do with my life. I just wanted to do plays forever and be on stage. And I said, this is it. I found where I belong. This is my home. And that's what I pursued all the way through undergrad and graduate school. But the whole time that I was studying to be an actor, I was reading plays. I was taking playwriting courses. I was studying dramaturgy and play analysis. But I didn't realize that what I was really training myself for was a life in the theater as a playwright.
Oh.
It's only later, after I graduated and tried to find an acting job, that I found it really hard to really sustain that as a career. So I started writing plays to perform in this little punk club called the 500 Cafe in Dallas, Texas, where I'd been bartending, and I took over the Wednesday night. I started a program called Words on Wednesdays, a poetry reading evening. And I knew a lot of poets, published poets, and I would set up an evening and invite them and advertise it and send press releases to the papers, and I paid them out of my pocket.
Wow.
My manager said, they can have an open bar too. And when they heard that, the poet said, we'll just do it for the open bar. They really just wanted to come. But they also could get a non-academic audience. They could get people coming into a bar, have drinks, and listen to poetry before a band. And that was so exciting to them. Then I thought that I should use this forum to feature some of my work, but I didn't think of myself as a poet. I said, I'll write a play, and I'll write it in verse, and then cast some students of mine, because I was also teaching high school at the time, and some musicians and actors that I know, and we'll do it. But my thinking wasn't just my thinking was to fill the slot, but the other part of my thinking was to feature myself as an actor. So I'd write these parts for myself that I would then act, and I'd show my talent to the populace, and I would invite casting directors and producers and yada yada, director, and then afterwards I'd go up to them and say, so what you think? What you think of my play and my performance? And they'd say, well, it was okay, it's pretty good, but the writing is really interesting. We're really fascinated in the writing. I said, well, what about my acting? They said, well, it was all right. But they were interested in what I was doing with these plays in terms of the writing and the directing and crafting of them. And they thought it was something that was new and fun and they'd never seen before. And it wasn't really like cabaret theater. They were like punk plays. They were wild, crazy, punk-ass plays. And they were fun to do. They included songs, and we talked in this weird sort of hip patter that was part beat poetry, part Octavio Solis, part punk rock. There were 10 in the Geometrische Saga, 10 plays. I guess for their time they were pretty out there, pretty just racy and
Well,
but
and yet
fun.
they were written in verse, or at
They were
least the
written in
first one.
verse.
Yeah. What was
They
it?
were
Partly
all written.
because it was a poetry night that you decided to write in
Yes.
verse, or was it just? Yeah.
Yes, that was it. Is they had to be written in verse because it was a poetry series, And so I had to make sure that they had to. Now they weren't all like rhyming verse. There was blank verse. They
Hmm.
didn't have to rhyme. Sometimes they would. I was more interested in the internal rhyme within the line rather than end rhyme. So and in wordplay, I was fascinated with wordplay. I was fascinated with mixing English with Spanish with other kinds of things. But the works didn't have anything to do with Latino culture at all. I was just doing it to kind of just get myself seen as an actor. I wasn't even conscious of myself that much as a Latino, really. But after I did those, then directors started coming and saying, "Come work with us. Come work with us, and you can act with us if you'll write for us." Um, and then finally, Teatro Dallas called me, and they wanted me to write a play for them and commission me. They were the first theater that ever paid me to write a play for their company, $1,000. And oh my gosh, I don't know how anyone let me get away with any of this. There's so many mistakes, so many theatrical things that I would do differently now than what I know now of theater. It's just that back then I didn't know the rules, and so I broke all the rules in a way that was refreshing and fun and liberating.
So lovely. What an amazing way to sort of get your toehold and then really start to find your voice as a playwright. Has your process changed much in terms of, when you sit down to write, do you have a process, or does it change sort of with every play and every project?
It does change with every project, but by and large, there's a consistent approach that I take. Um, and that's that I never plan my plays ahead of time, even if I know what the subject matter is, even if I do all that research, and I'm doing a ton of it right now. Um, in the end, I throw the research aside and I just begin writing. I begin writing according to the images that come to me, and the images may be scene one, or they may be from scene 10, or from somewhere else in the play. I don't know where they are. I write the scene that calls me. I write toward the voices that are crying for some expression, and so I write in that way. So sometimes I write scenes out of order. Sometimes I write them in order, but I don't know at the time that they are in order until I'm done. And But that's how I get past things like writer's block. Because sometimes I'll write scene one and I'll struggle with scene two, but I can already see scene 6 or 8 or whatever. And then I go, well, what the fuck? Why am I waiting? Let me just write that scene. So I'll write it and make discoveries about what actually scene two should be about. And so then scene two becomes clear. Uh, but because I don't plan my plays, it means that often they're really, really fat, unwieldy. There are dead ends. There are plays inside of plays that need to be eventually extracted. I never know the ending until I get there. So sometimes there's 2 or 3 or 4 endings,
Hmm.
and because I never plan them, and it's only then that after that I come back, and that's the crafting, that's the editing. That's when you start, taking this up, taking that, and I can be ruthless. Probably not as ruthless as another dramaturg would be, because it's not their material. They don't care. Cut this, cut that, cut that. But I can be pretty ruthless, and so a lot of my process works like that. But generally, you have to wait till you start hearing those voices. Sometimes you have to make them. You have to make them talk. But when they do, you better listen.
Can you talk a little bit about the unique start to
Oh my
hearing the
gosh,
voices of
yeah,
this play?
yeah. Well, I was asked by the National Steinbeck Center to join them on an expedition. They were going to do research. They were going to, in preparation for the celebration the following year, next year's conference, Steinbeck Conference, they were going to feature um, the book, the Grapes of Wrath, his novel, because it was going to be the 75th anniversary of the publication of his novel, and so they wanted to do something special for that. Um, And they asked me and two other artists to join them on this expedition, where five of their members, including the executive director, Colleen Bailey, and one of the artists was a visual artist, and the other one was a filmmaker who brought his crew of five with him, and myself. We're all going to go to Sallisaw, Oklahoma, where the Grapes of Wrath begins, with the Joad family there, just pulling up stakes from a house that's buried in sand, mountains of sand. And as the book recounts, they leave their home, get on Route 66, the Mother Road, as Steinbeck called it, and travel westward to California. They wanted us to take the same journey. That we were all going to go out there in two vehicles, an RV with the film crew inside, and sometimes us, we switched, and a large van, and do this journey. Fly to Oklahoma City, get the RV, rent the van, and then drive automatically east to Sallisaw, which is far out in eastern Oklahoma near the Arkansas border, near the Ozarks. We were out there one day, and then we started the journey. It took 12 days to do that same journey. We had community partners all along the way at places where we would stop and spend the night, where we would then take oral histories from people that were prepped for us to talk to them. So there was always a group of people for us to interview and gather their oral histories. They ranged from people who were survivors of the Dust Bowl and the Depression, in Sallisaw especially, to people who were dealing with the recession, a bad economy, or coming back from rehab, who've lost their family, or who had to divorce their wife because she was dealing with alcohol abuse or substance abuse, who came from broken families or dealing with other kinds of horrible abuse. And just spoke with people, a cross section of Americans, black Americans who were also living in towns, those sundown towns, that you had to be indoors or out of that town by the time of sunset. And with Native Americans as well. We stayed in WPA cabins in Canyon, Texas. We helped those hot air balloons in Albuquerque. We were at coincidentally at the Hot Balloon Festival, when they unleash all those thousands of balloons in the air. We helped one couple get their basket ready. We taught workshops. We took workshops. We broke bread together. Did a lot of things. We did so much, but a lot of it mainly involved just driving for long stretches and then talking to a lot of people. And always at the end of the night, a moment where we would decompress. Us three artists with Colleen Bailey on camera talking about, so what was your day like? What happened today? And we would just all go around in the room and talk about it. I was reading The Grapes of Wrath during that whole trip. Hadn't touched it since high school. And I was just amazed to see how little things had changed from the pages to reality out the window of the RV, but also how dramatically things have changed since then. Still a lot of discontent in the air, I felt, especially in those small rural towns that were or are just this close to becoming ghost towns that are dealing with a depression rather than a recession. And imagine now with COVID. Imagine now. And included in one of the questionnaires for these oral histories was the question, have you ever read The Grapes of Wrath or seen the movie? Everyone that we asked that said no, but many of them had an opinion about it. In Oklahoma, it was mainly negative. They hated the novel. They hated Steinbeck. They thought that he did the people a disservice by depicting them as rubes and hicks and dirty and slobs. And I just thought, wow, have you read the book? It's just not like that at all. They're ennobled. Yeah, they're not college educated, even high school educated people, but they're ennobled through their struggle. And they went, no, we just don't like it. We've never read it. Don't care to. But when we finally made it to Bakersfield, California, it was the end of the journey, and I still had not known my way into what I was going to do as a writer. I, I tried not to write a play, tried not to think of writing a play because the Stemming Center wanted me to present something at their conference. So it didn't make sense to try to write a play, but maybe something I could present and read myself, or something that I could get a few actors for an evening of readers' theater or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was thinking. But I wasn't thinking play. But when I got to Bakersfield, we went to the Sunset Camp, which is the first federally mandated migrant camp that was built there specifically to house the flood of Okies that came to California, and it's still there. And it's old buildings that are historical, that are historically, they're protected as historical buildings, but the houses are still in use, except that instead of Okies that are in these homes, they are Mexican migrant workers from Mexico coming over on visas to work the pisca, to go and pick crops. And they do that hard, backbreaking work daily, and then move on to another camp to work in some other ranch, some other farm, following the seasons. And so we interviewed some people there, but there was this one young man who really was eager to talk to me since the day before, and he had long hair all the way down to his butt, and wore a nice pleated shirt and some shorts that went down to his ankles, and tennis shoes, and he just looked really well, clean cut and everything, had a little beard. And he wanted to talk to me, so I spoke with him. We interviewed him, and he said that he had lived at that camp, that he and his mother had both lived there, and he'd worked on the pisca, and that now he was a spoken word artist and a muralist, and that was what he did mainly. Besides, also carpentry jobs, painting jobs, etc. But that he considered himself an artist. And he had stories to tell about growing up there. But I asked him, have you ever read The Grapes of Wrath? And he said, yeah, I have. He's the only one who read it. The only one of everyone we talked to who had ever read the book. Not only that, he could recite passages by heart back to me, which I found really remarkable. And he said one thing that really stuck with me. He said, we are the new Okies, and I am the new Tom Joad. And bing! He just gave me my play. And I said, okay, thank you. And I knew my mission. And so I started writing the play very quickly. It came out very, very quickly because I knew what the journey was. I knew I've been on that journey, except that Martin in the play, he takes it in reverse. He starts at the Sunset Camp and goes back to Sallisaw.
One of the things that really resonates and echoes with me in all of your writing is this sort of mythological component that's there. And generally, I'm curious where that comes from. I mean, also the element of the chorus in Mother Road, that's so haunting and magical. And I'm curious where that idea came from, and sort of the general mythology of the worlds of your plays.
Part of it is a result of craft. I knew that there were going to be these two people taking this journey, and they were going to pick up, two more, James and Mo, and they were going to have encounters with other people down the line in the story, and that they bear some significance in each scene, but then you wouldn't see them again. Kind of like the people that we saw when we went on our trip. But I wanted them all to matter more than I wanted it to feel like we were seeing not just that one character in that one scene and then that character would disappear. I wanted it to feel like they were seeing one character play various different roles all the way through, so that it would feel like really it's a three-character play. The William, Martine, and then the chorus, and the chorus could then turn into Mo, turn into James, and turn into Curtis, and everyone, the trooper, state trooper, Abelardo, all of these, and Abelardo's ghost. They would turn into all of these, but then they could come back in and become part of this other more significant entity, which was the chorus. I felt like that then I could justify having these parts because I'm all, it seems dramaturgically unsound to introduce a new character, 20 pages before the play is over, to introduce Curtis at the very end.
Right.
But, you really have seen Curtis from the very beginning of the play, except he's playing all these other various roles, not just as a chorus member, but as other bystanders or whatever in other parts. You've seen him before, so when he appears as Curtis, it's nothing new. So part of it had to do with craft, but part of it had to do with creating what I felt was the voice of the road, the road that has all our experiences in the treads and skid marks of the long highway. We're all there. We're all there, and we've been there for at least a century on these highways, and so we haunt the road, and I feel the presence of other people, a presence of those experiences in the slightest way, as a vibration, even whenever I'm on the road. And so I feel I'm never alone when I'm driving. I never feel alone when I'm driving. And I wanted to see if I could have the road be represented, not just as a strip on the stage, but as characters, people, the people who migrated west from the Dust Bowl to California, but the people that then went back, and the people that go back and forth. And I thought this would be a good way to do that. And then there's a third dynamic, and that's that I have a classical education, rooted in classical mythology and in classical Greek theater. I love classical Greek theater, and I love myth, and I love the idea of the epic story. And so I'm a student of the epic, and I try to bring that to as much of my work as I can. Sometimes it's not meant to, like Lydia is not a mythic work. It feels very much like a family play, but there's other plays like Dreamlandia, and which feels more Shakespearean, or more like Calderon, which is based on Life is a Dream. And then Santos and Santos, a 3-act play, which also feels like I'm telling an epic, a crime epic about this Latino family in El Paso. So I bring that to bear in my work. As much as I try to shed it and say, I'm not part of Western theater anymore. I'm a Latino. I'm part of this hemisphere now. You can't shed those things right away. You are what you've learned. You can't unlearn. You can't unknow.
Thank you so much for joining us and for all of your amazing insight. We are we feel so lucky at PCPA and in the Santa Maria Valley to not only get this chance to chat with you, but also to experience your powerful play, Mother Road.
Yeah, Emily, I really do hope that this work connects with the community. It seems to be reverberating with everything that's going on in the country right now, but I hope it outlives this as well. I hope this passes and we find more unity as a society in this country. I think that's what my play is looking toward. It's about building a new American family, person by person in this truck that's named after Cesar Chavez, by the way. Building it first with William, who is part of the old order, Martine, who's part of the new order, but also with Mo and with James, who's African American, and with Curtis, who's Native American. These are all part of the new American family that William is bringing back to the heartland of this country, and that's what I hope. Is the resonant message of this work, among other messages, of course, because that's the times we're living in. Have to be responded to, and I didn't know that I was responding to the times with this play, but it seems like it's resonating with everything that's going on right now.
That's beautiful and powerful. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. It's my pleasure.